looking at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13, and in the following verses through verse 16, there are five commands in this short text. Sometimes we read a passage or a paragraph or verses, and as they're separated in verses, we lose context. In the context here, there are five, no less than five of these commands. Now, I'm going to give them to you, and then we'll read the text. Gird up your loins. That's number one. Be sober, or the idea there is be in control of your thinking process. Number three, hope to the end, or fix your hope. And number four, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lust which you pursued in ignorance. And number five, finally, be holy as he is holy. And so there are five things that the author gives us to think about and to understand. These are directives to us as commands. And so we want to be, I hope that's not my phone. Maybe it's just my hearing aid going off. At any rate, we want these commands to be absorbed in the context, and so let's gain the context concerning that. Verse 10, which salvation the prophet sought and searched diligently, who prophesied of the grace that should come unto you, searching what time or what manner of time the Spirit of Christ, which was in them, did point unto, when it testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ, and the glories that should follow them, to whom it was revealed that not unto themselves, but unto you did they minister these things, which now have been announced unto you through them that preach the gospel unto you by the Holy Spirit, sent forth from heaven, which things angels desire to look into, whereof, for, or because of, or be, therefore, conclusion is, because that state exists, because that understanding exists, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and set your hope perfectly on the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ, as children of obedience, not fashioning yourselves according to your former lust in the time of your ignorance, but like as he who called you is holy, be ye yourselves also holy in all manner of living, because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. So the thing of the five commands that are brought out here, they are just the natural result, the natural following of the fact that the gospel had been preached, and not only that, it was that plan of God that even the angels desire to look into. And so the mystery of godliness, as it's called in other places, this is something that began before the world was ever created. And he talks about, in verse 11 particularly, searching what time or what manner of time the Spirit of Christ, which was in them. That's very important in understanding Noah's work in preaching the preaching of Noah, the Spirit of Christ. It's very important in understanding. Sometimes we have a lot of trouble understanding a passage of Scripture because we just haven't pursued the background for it. So the spirits that were in prison, which Christ preached to, here, this opens your eyes to how that preaching was done. how that preaching was done, through what medium operandi that preaching was done. Not that Christ opened the gates of hell, stood on a precipice there of the pits of hell, preached the gospel, and then backed out, closed the gates of hell, and walked away. Well, can you imagine how many gospel sermons would you think it'd take to empty hell? Yeah. You would empty hell of all of its residents with one gospel sermon. And yet, Jesus on this earth talked more about hell than any other person that's mentioned in the Bible. It was ongoing, it still existed, people were still there. And people were going there, and people would be assigned that in the coming of the ages. And so, the context of chapter 1 helps you with understanding the verses of chapter 3. But in verse 13, gird up. Now, that's an expression that comes from what, Brandon? You remember? You've read history? Huh? Yeah. Yeah, it's an expression for, the trumpets blowing. Now, what does that expression exactly deal with? What's the idea of gird? Huh? Yeah, and pulling up they wore, I hate to say this, James, but they wore dresses. They did. They didn't wear trousers. Actually, the battle over the pantsuits years ago in the church, the women were more correct than the men wearing the pants. And the word pants is derivative from the word panties, So men wear trousers and women wear pants. Okay? So I remember pantsuit free that was at Floydada for a while. That's what Abe Lincoln called him. Because he went around the brotherhood and telling all the women that wore pants was going to hell because they wasn't wearing a dress. But the men wore the dress first. They did. Read the Old Testament about men going up the steps of the temple and stuff, and there wasn't supposed to be a crowd within so many feet of them because they would peer up their dress. So they wore these dresses. So when they gird up their loins, they buckled on that armor belt, as Tommy mentioned. They're getting ready for war, as Lewis shows us, but they reached down and they caught that skirt, the back of that skirt, and they pulled the thing up between their legs, and gathering up the front of it, they tucked it in behind that armor belt, tucked it down in behind. Now, that got the skirt out of the way, and it was tucked in to such a way that it gave them freedom from about half thigh down to their lace-up, high-top sandal-type boots that they wore. But they, shocking as it may seem to most people today, the men actually wore similar to what the women wear today, with a skirt with a belt at the top of it. A belt at the top of it. The trouser thing did not come into existence until after the Victorian age. Have you ever seen pictures of these famous men in the Victorian age, and they had that big, looks like a styrofoam collar around their neck? You remember? And then you go down the waist, and there hangs a belt and a sword. And then they had them funny little old, it looks like a high wire suit. And then the stockings start right at the top of the thigh. And that was considered the dress of a gentleman. The dress of a gentleman. In the Victorian age, and the women wore those long flowing dress style. Matter of fact, wedding dresses today are they are patterned after the Victorian, 1600 type of attire, the wedding dress. And so history shows us, even with this simple expression, gird up your loins, the type of garment that it would take. So the picture is when you reach down and grab the back of that skirt and stuff it in that armor belt, then you are ready as you can be. You're not going to be entangled with garments. You're not going to be all, uh, there's not going to be too much clothes on, and you're going to be stripped for battle. That's the idea. So apply that to your mind. Set your mind. Set your mind on things above, yeah, but also understand that you're involved in something that requires good, somber, sober thinking. Okay? So get ready. Get ready. Peter issues this command. So, strenuous activity, and the mind must lead the activity. We need then to discipline our minds for action. Need to do that. We need to discipline our mind. And that it requires a certain amount of training to do that. It requires a certain amount of training. When everything's going mad in front of you, there requires training to keep your mind on the whole picture. You have to develop it. We are trained at different things. Something as simple as a high school football game. You know, the quarterback, the ball snapped, the quarterback drops back in the pocket. Everything's going on in his face. Everything's trying to reach him, everything, and he's looking. And he's got to be able to concentrate on what is developing. And a lot of guys can't do that, and that's why they're not quarterbacks. Or if you're a defensive captain, now I'm talking about 11-man football, this other stuff I can't say much about. But in 11-man football, the defensive captain on the defensive team calls the stunts or the plays, and then he has to see the play developing regardless of what's going on in front of him, because he's made contact with the line, and they're trying to blow him out of there so they can run a play, and you've got to see past all of that and see where the ball is. And that's what this idea is. Gird up your mind. Discipline your mind so you can see where the ball is. A lot of trash Satan throws up in the way all the time. See where the ball is. Look through all of that waving hands and all that kind of stuff. Keep your eye on the ball. It requires a discipline to do that. There's a discipline that's required for action here. And that's why he follows it up with a second command. Be sober. Now, what does that bring to mind? Clear-minded. Mm-hmm. You ever been around a drunk? Anybody been around a drunk? I'm not talking about alcoholic. I'm talking about a drunk. Been around a drunk, somebody that's drunk. They are disoriented. You can't talk to them. When you try, you realize you're talking to the beverage, the alcoholic beverage. You're not talking to the person because their mind is disoriented, and so you can address. The only thing you can do, with the drunk is two things. You can respond to him by and some drunks are different, by an act of kindness or mercy, and try to get him coupled up pretty easy, or you can respond with force, whatever's necessary. But someone that is drunken or disoriented, they lack self-control, and they are invariably not alert to their surroundings. To their surroundings. And so Peter couples this together, and he says, now, gird up your mind. So that's all right. Let's go with that. Number one, a disciplined mind is practicing behavior, and you're doing so in such a way that you exert control. A drunk, you see the opposite. A drunk has no self-control. All right. Number two, a drunk is disoriented by the process of the chemical action from the alcoholic beverage in the brain. And so when the brain is not functioning properly, you have disorientation, you have a lack of self-control, and you have someone impervious to surroundings. You don't want to be like that, do you? No, you don't. You want to know where you are and what's going on around you. That's why every holiday on the American calendar after 7 o'clock on Friday evening, you pass 1 in 9 drivers that have had something to drink, alcoholic beverage, and you pass 1 in 4 that's really too drunk to drive. Did you know that? Yeah, from 7 o'clock Friday to 7 o'clock Monday, the weekend that we just had, the New Year's weekend, the Christmas holidays, Thanksgiving weekend. We're jumping forward to May, another big holiday, 4th of July. 1 in every 9 you pass has had something to drink, which has a disorienting potential to the mind, a lack of alertness to awareness of the situation. You don't want to do that. You don't want to send your kids out on the highway with a whole line of drunks coming at them with a car going 75 miles an hour. You don't do that. You say, that's unsafe. It's unsafe. And sure it is. But Peter says, maintain a calm and a thoughtful state of mind, and be in full control of your actions. That's the way Christians act. That's the way Christians are to react. And that comes with training. That comes with knowledge. It teaches children and the rest of us. It teaches us how to act and react. Any school teacher in the public school system in America, they can tell you, and they sometimes have commented to me, they can tell you what kids in the community go to church on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. Because when they put the little kids, when they put them in their seats, they know how to behave. And those that haven't gone to, when they're little, haven't gone to any Bible class type of situation or church, they don't know how to act. They don't know how to act. And unfortunately, you can't pinch all their heads off. You've got to deal with that. You've got to deal with that, and you've got to think it through, and you've got to be in full control of your actions. And so Peter says, gird up. All right, battle time. Number 2, sober. Sober entails a lot of things. Oriented, control, alert to surroundings. Alert to surroundings. That's why we have trouble when we get older falling. Falling. If you go into the hospital to see somebody and there'll be a yellow sign on the door that says fall alert. Have you seen that? What's it for? Help us out, darling. Yeah, yeah. And you know, I don't know why, but that bothers us even to talk about it, doesn't it? It just does, you know, because when we get a certain age, there we have a uh, we have a something up here. I know my dad went to this. I call them podiologists. You know, these podiatrists. Dad went to several of them because feet wouldn't work, and he would fall, and his feet wouldn't work, and he'd go to another foot specialist, and they'd give him everything to. One of them gave him blue emu. You know what that is? Doyle, do you do that? You don't blue emu? Ah, well, anyway, some kind of lotion made from emu juice, and they gave him that, and they said it'd fix him right up. Well, it's like vitamin C. If you believe it'll work, it will, you know. So he tried that for a while, and he still was having these terrible falls. So he went to see the right doctor, and they said, Mr. Crowley, it's not your feet. It's not your feet. It's up here. It's up here. And your brain has reached a point that it's not processing situational awareness. Now, what's that mean? Thank you for zeroing in on the target. What you didn't realize, there may be something in front of you that you won't get your foot over. You won't get your foot over, and it happens. And I have been investigated by the Adult Protective Services. Nathan, have you been there yet? I'll call them. But I've been investigated by those people. Dimitri, what do you think about that? I wasn't beating on the dog either. You see, my wife had fallen several times and broken bone. I got her back from the hospital about 1:30, had her cast took off her leg, and we were rejoicing in that. I was sitting in the family room. She come in carrying something, I don't know what it was, and missed the step and fell right toward me, and she hit the corner of that end table and broke her left arm. Right back to the emergency room. We just left there, you know, where they'd, not the emergency room, but where they'd cut that cast off her left leg. Right back over there. They x-rayed, said, well, Mr. Crowley, your left arm's broke. Yeah. Well, then I get Adult Protective Services. And it wasn't me. It was this thing in the brain. Lack of awareness. That's what causes falls. Lack of awareness to circumstance or situation. That's what the doctors, the specialists said. So, we need to be ready for the battle. We need to be oriented. We need self-control. And we need to be alert to surroundings where you are, what you are. The third thing is patiently fix your hope, or hope to the end. We must recognize then who's in charge, who's in control, and steadfastly put our hope for him. The focus of our expectation, the grace of God. We experience that, but we also realize what Peter's talking about, that we will be granted the fulfillment of our hope at the coming of Jesus. At the coming of Jesus. So we hope. So we hope. We look forward. It becomes faith calls things that are not seen as reality. We do not see it, but we know it's there. And so we hope fixed on Jesus. We may not understand all of the trifles. We may not understand everything that tangles us up. We may not understand the big things of life. We may not grasp that like we should. Or somebody might say, you just don't understand, and the problem is we don't. We don't. But we know the end of this. We know the end, and that's Jesus. And that'll be all right. The Bible says that he can save to the uttermost those that draw near unto God through him. There's confidence in it. Isn't that what you want? Don't you like confidence in the finished product? Don't you like to see where it's going to end? You know, when we start building something, whatever it might be, do you have an idea where it's going to end? Now, I'm not talking about the end of your bank account. After you've gone to Home Depot 2 or 3 times, and then you stop by at Lowe's there in Lubbock to see if you're getting a better price. And I'm not talking about being at the end of your budget for that month. I'm talking about when you're building something, can you see the end of it? You have it fixed in your mind, right? Oh yeah, you visualize what you're going to need, and you lay it out, don't you? You lay it out. You have the idea, you know. You call them and you say, I need X number of feet of this lumber, that lumber, and out comes the delivery truck, and I found out that's the best way to do it. It's $110 from Lowe's in Lubbock to my house, and the truck comes, unloads it, takes the straps off of it, and it's right there on the job site. And with my pickup truck or whatever, I make 5 or 6 trips to get that amount of material, and you know, it's just cheaper to have it delivered. And I see that pile of material laying there, or stack of material, and I can see the end of it. I can see the end of it. I know what I'm about to do. I know where it's going to go. I can almost visualize every board. And you need to do that, or you're going to have a lot of waste. You're going to have a lot of waste. And so you fix your mind, or you hope. You recognize I'm in control of this project, and I can bring it about. When you build a fence, you know where you're going. You see the end of it in your mind already. You do. You already see the end of it. So hope is much like that. We see the end of it. We see the end of it. And that's what Peter's talking about at the revelation of Jesus Christ. They lived their life just like we live. And their lives, some of them were a little shorter, some were a little longer than some of ours, but it was the same thing. You say, well, that was years ago. No, the lifespan's still the same. You still have X number of years you're waiting on Jesus. Whether you lived in the 2nd century, the 4th century, or the 19th century, or here we are in a brand new decade of the 21st century, the lifespan's still the same, waiting on Jesus. Nothing's changed. 70 years, if by reason of strength, maybe 80. Yeah, maybe 80. Nothing's changed from Peter's day. That's about the average life span for them, and it is for us. And so the fixture of hope, if you will, it occupy basically the same amount of years. No magic in that. No magic for them. That's the way life is. Set your mind on Jesus. Set your mind on Jesus. And the fourth thing, here's where he says, he drops off in the negative. Don't fashion yourself, according to your former lifestyle. Don't do that. It didn't bring you anything to start with. Why do you want to go back to it, you see? Why do you want to go back to it? You don't want to do that. And the good old days weren't so good anyway. Who wants to go back to the good old days? Not me. I'm looking forward to the great adventure ahead. Not the good old days. The good old days, you ever drawed water with ice on the chain as it went through the pulley? And you had to draw X number of buckets of water for the family wash every Thursday. You ever do that? And your hands so biting cold that you almost cry because that cold chain and all that. I don't want to go back to doing that. I did that at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. I don't want to go back to doing that. That's not funny at all. I'd rather just turn on the tap and watch the water get hot. So looking back is no good. Trying to go back is no good. Not fashioning yourselves according to the former lust and your ignorance. That's what it is. Look what he says. Yeah, according in the time of your ignorance. I ought to know better by now. Are there some things in this life you do better today because you've learned better? There are just some things. Quit beating yourself up. You quit beating yourself up. You quit, overdoing because you say, oh, well, it'll be all right in a couple of days, and all the soreness will be gone, and all. You quit doing things like that. You finally learn enough not to do, and so this same phrase is translated, be not conformed in Romans 12, verse 2, where Paul says, don't be conformed. So don't let the world squeeze you in its mold, and then you look like somebody of the world. Don't do that. And he's telling us don't do that because of the gospel in your life. That's going to make a difference in your life. It makes a difference in young men. They learn responsibility. They learn how to treat young ladies, and young ladies learn how to behave themselves. This is in the gospel truths of Scripture, and it makes a wonderful life when we learn how to behave ourselves and not go back to what maybe in our earlier life was not good behavior. I don't want to go back and do that. I have repented of that. I have torn myself away from that. I don't want to go back and do that. And I don't want to be with the crowd that does. And so he said, you're not of the world. Don't wear the fashion of the world. Don't do that. You've broken loose from that. Now stay loose from it. And don't let it ensnare you. Don't let it capture you. Don't let the glitter capture you that Satan always does all over everything. And he said, in the time of your ignorance. What dispels ignorance? Enforce the brain housing group, That's it, right there. Knowledge goes right up here. And the wonderful ability that God's given us in the brain, recall. We learned. I don't act like that anymore. That's when I was ignorant. I don't want to be like that anymore. That didn't help me at all. Why do I think it'd help me now? I don't want to do it anymore. I'm living for Jesus. I'm living for Jesus. And so the last point he says, number 5, be you holy. Be holy. God is first and foremost a holy God. And we are called to fashion ourselves after him. And so complete holiness is out of our reach this side of glory. There's no doubt about that. but it should be our goal. It should be our goal, brethren. And so Peter, he says, here's what the book says. You be holy because I'm holy. So if God says like it did, if you're going to associate with me, then you're going to have to be like me. You're going to have to be holy. Now, perfect holiness, like I said, we will not find it on this side, but that's our goal. That's our objective. That's it. Yes. Yeah, and we have the righteousness of God given to us in Jesus. It's given to us. We don't generate it. We don't manufacture it. It's given to us. So Peter, in these 5 commands in this short passage that we've looked at, he's showing us how to set ourselves for the godly life that we've learned through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's a marvelous life. It's a marvelous life. Appreciate your attention this morning. Thank you very much.